Okay, everybody. Hi, I am back. We are going to get into the Maoist economy. Just a quick review with a new concept or a new metaphor, let's say, and then we're going to get into what happens with Deng because that's where the thrust of the questions and so forth come from. All right, so the Maoist command economy. This is just review. We don't really need to go over this. 5-year plans, this is all stuff we've talked about. We talked about the Great Leap Forward, where everybody was making steel in their backyards. We talked about the fact that China didn't really industrialize until the mid 20th century. And then we talked about Deng. Being brought in to try and help restore the economic stability after Mao died in 1977. But before we get into Deng, I want to talk about the iron rice bowl, which is such a great metaphor. So you see the woman here in the picture, she's holding a rice bowl. Obviously, rice, staple food in China is today, was back in the day. So the iron rice bowl is the same idea as womb to tomb coverage like we had in the UK. It's a metaphor. And the metaphor is under a command economy, you have a guaranteed job, you have secure, you have, steady income, you have benefits, you get what you need and no more. Core value is equality. The metaphor iron rice bowl, you can't wreck it. If you drop it, it doesn't break. So their metaphor, like womb to tomb coverage or welfare state, is iron rice bowl. Now keep in mind that there are many policies under the iron rice bowl that collectively are welfare state policies. So iron rice bowl isn't a policy in itself. It's the umbrella for all of the policies that create a welfare state in a command economy in China. So be clear about that. All right, so let's look at some of the things that existed under Mao. How did Mao keep it all going? Well, a couple of things. The hukou system is still in effect today, although it has now been greatly relaxed. But here's what it was. When they industrialized, they had to somehow guarantee that not everybody would be flocking from the rural areas to the urban areas, because that's what happens during industrialization. You know that from history. Anytime a state industrializes, you've got movement to the cities as factories are emerging and manufacturing is the is at the core of the economy and so forth. So in the 1950s, as this was all going on, Mao established something called the Household Registration System, or hukou. If you look over here and you see this passport-looking thing, this is the household registration, and it's like a passport. It tells people where you were born. And this is what controlled movement by China's rural population. So people could ask to see your, I don't know if they called it hukou or what they called this thing, but they could ask to see your passport looking thing and it would say where you were born. And so where you were born is where you got all of your benefits. It's presumably where you worked, it's where you lived, it's where you got educated, it's where one-child policy was implemented, where you were born. So in this way, they prevented the urban slums, the massive pollution that tends to come with, tenement housing and things of that sort. Migrants couldn't relocate to the cities for factory work, except under, extreme circumstances and whatnot. And this kept people on the farms. So you can imagine how this urban-rural divide started in the mid-20th century, because where's your education going to be better? In the cities or the rural areas? Where are your job opportunities ultimately going to be better after you industrialize? The rural areas or the cities? So here we go. That's why it's the #1 cleavage today. All right. Well, along with the hukou came this notion of danwei. It stands for work units. And a work unit was the center of a person's economic, social, and political life. And it provided all these things for people. It's where you had your pay, your salary, your housing, your health care. Again, as I said, monitoring of the one-child policy. They had to give, whoever was in charge of the Danwei had to give you permission to change jobs. It's where you had political meetings of the Communist Party. All of this was managed through work units. So people in their cities or towns or villages would kind of, like any business today, you'd sort of congregate with those same people, and then all of this would be orchestrated through whoever was in charge. The Donway still exist today, but their influence is almost, non-existent because, China's current economy, people are much more mobile than they used to be. But because the hukou still exists, you still have control over where people can move. So even though China today allows allows people to go from the rural areas on the farms to go work in cities, you don't get to work in any city you want. Like, they don't let you go to Beijing or Shanghai or Guangzhou or some of the really huge cities because those places are overpopulated, but you can go to some of the smaller ones. So things are still controlled. They haven't given up the hukou for that very reason, so that they don't overdo Beijing, for example, that's already overpopulated. So I would know about Mao's iron rice bowl. I would know about the hukou system. I would know about the Danwei system. All right, well, then comes Deng. And as early as 1978, things start to change drastically. And this is economic liberalization on steroids. But it's not shock therapy. It's very calculated, and it goes extremely well. And I think I've mentioned that Deng is credited with doing so much for the economy in China, laying the foundation of the incredibly expansive, huge economy that it is today. Although, by the way, you guys, I was reading that because of coronavirus, that their economy is really shaken to the core right now, as people are predicting ours is. And you can see with shutdown of all these businesses and stuff, that's not good for anybody, and this is going to be a global recession, I feel. But we'll see how long people, how patient they are with the Communist Party when their economic livelihoods are threatened. I just also read that China's journalists have been expelled because I don't think they want them reporting on what is exactly happening over there. Interesting times, to say the least. All right, back to Deng. Socialist market economy was adopted in 1979. So this is your some government run and owned businesses, however, allowing for private enterprise as well. So it's a gradual infusion of capitalism, but it's all under state control. All right, so this is very calculated on the part of the Chinese. Some things that come into new policies under Deng. One is the household responsibility system. And I almost said registration system, and this confuses and tricks a number of CompGov students, because household registration system is the hukou system. Household responsibility system is what Deng passed in the 1980s. And what this is getting rid of all of the collectivized farms and communes. No longer are we managing farms in a collective nature. Instead, we subdivide the land and give people their own plots of land in the rural areas. This way, people can do with it what they want, and you are much more likely to produce more. You create incentive. It's been shown that this collectivization does not produce as much. People tend to free ride. They don't work as hard as they could because the pay's the same. So state land is contracted to individuals to make their own farming decisions. And guess what? If I'm not into farming, and that was painfully clear as I didn't do anything on the collectivized farms, I can sell my plot of, or, lease my plot of land to somebody who is. I could give my plot of land to Mr. Dahlman, for example, who might be like farmer extraordinaire. And instead, I could be freed up to go do some sort of township and village enterprise, which also came on the scene in the 1980s in the rural areas. These were factories and businesses that were set up specifically targeted for rural areas so that there would be other businesses that people could get involved with, and these were run locally. So already your big cities are, establishing factories and manufacturing and all these things, but there had to be things for people to do in the rural areas as well. So TVEs, as they were called, was another thing that Deng introduced in order for people like me who didn't want to farm to be able to do other kinds of work that was meaningful. And so now the Dahlmans of the world who liked farming could have these more corporate type farms as they were, experts at farming, and it would free up people like me to do other stuff. It was really a brilliant plan, and it worked very well for a long time. The other thing that went down was China targeted certain areas, I think there were about 10 of them when all was said and done, to be special economic zones. The SEZs, special economic zones, also came on the scene in the 1980s, and it gave foreign investors tax incentive to invest in local cities that were earmarked for development. Now, why, if I don't have to pay taxes, or I can invest in businesses that are getting started, and I'm thinking, maybe I'm a U.S. investor, and I'm thinking, my gosh, if I could tap into the Chinese market, that could be just a boon for my business. Well, China had to give tax incentives and things of that sort in order to get people to do that. Here's the deal. I can't say nobody, but most people in China didn't have capital to invest in businesses because it was a command economy. Everyone got, minimal amounts of money, to take care of their daily needs. They didn't have excess savings to go investing in businesses. So this was another brilliant plan by Deng to get other people's money from the outside to be the capital to develop these cities. And it's incredible what happened. Here was the very first one in 1979. It's Shenzhen, and it's not too far from Hong Kong. Well, look at the before and after pictures, you guys. Here is before in 1980, before Shenzhen opened itself up to foreign investment. And then look at it in 2000. I mean, it was such a vibrant community in 2000. And this is all, not all, but a lot of it is being done with foreign capital, where businesses are coming in from all over the world, and they're creating this incredible, vibrant economy as these cities start to develop. This was just a brilliant plan. I mean, so different. China going from a command economy to a capitalist economy, from what happened with the Soviet Union going to Russia in its shock therapy days of the 1990s. Just so much better. They were not under the kind of pressure that Russia was to do it overnight. All right, well, the effects of Deng's reforms are many. And this is where we'll start. The agriculture and income increased for farmers, because you've got the Dahlmans of the world who are, they've got corporate farms. They now get to keep their profits. They're good at farming, and those farmers are going to make a little bit more money. Private businesses increase. 2/3 of the GDP now in China are private businesses. The government, keeps its hand in the ones that it wants to control, but it's basically given Chinese people just free range to just go out and do. And look at all the incredible businesses that have occurred. I mean, there's a reason why you have 93 billionaires sitting in their National People's Congress. It's because they've taken off the reins, they've let them go, create and innovate and do all those things. And that's why the economy's where it's at. 2004, their constitution was amended to provide for private property rights. If you're going to allow people to lease farmland, for example, to somebody else, if you're going to establish businesses, you've got to, they've got to put bricks and mortar somewhere. Who now owns this property? Well, the state makes it very clear that they continue to have ownership rights, but they lease it to people to do what they want to on that property. And so now they've got a whole slew of property laws. The 2007 property law allows you to create, transfer, and own property. Land tenure remains, though. Be very, very clear. All roads continue to lead to the CCP. The state owns all land, but individuals possess a right to use it. All right, I'm going to stop this one. We have one more to go, and it probably won't even be the full 15 minutes. So thanks for hanging in there with me. I'll be back soon.